Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, what should you do? Keep on breathing. From Los Angeles and from the Big Apple in New York City, I'm Dave Nasani. You're on the Caregiver Dave Show, along with my lovely co-host Adrienne Gruberg at thecaregiverspace.org. And we're coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on 21 global audio and video platforms, including iHeartRadio and iTunes and YouTube and Spreaker, SoundCloud, and a whole bunch more. I'm not going to name them all, but we're so happy that you're on here with us. And we're proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM, as well as the top 6 best podcasts by caring.com, as well as #3 podcast out of thousands of caregiver podcasts on FeedSpot. And we do have an exciting show planned for you today. Ashley Bendiksen. Did I say that right?
You got it. Nailed it.
Bendiksen. Okay, there was a company that made brakes. It's called Bendix. So I'll just say Bendiksen.
There you go. Perfect.
Adrienne making a racket if she joins us. Hi, Adrienne.
Adrienne making a racket because I had no audio.
Well, welcome to the show, Adrienne. And we do have an
Thank
exciting
you.
show planned for you, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Right on cue. And Ashley Bendiksen is a best-selling author of The Language of Time, a powerful memoir chronicling her story as a caregiver to her mother after she developed early-onset Alzheimer's at just age 48 years old. Can that happen,
Wow.
Adrienne? Someone that young?
Yeah, I had a friend who like that. Yeah.
Well, we
was a
discussed
shock
how
when-
to reframe difficult moments, and that's certainly a difficult moment. The gift of being a caregiver and how to cultivate meaning in the time we share with our loved ones. But before we get started, I want to thank my last week's guest, me and Adrienne. We had a cancellation. Thank you, Adrienne, for showing up last week, and it was a
You're welcome.
great interview. And you can thank me too. Go ahead, I'll give you a moment.
Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. Anytime. Anytime you're in a bind, just call me.
Oh,
Okay. Just
Be
a
careful.
reminder. Yeah, and when I'm out in New York, we should find a little time to go grab, we can't grab lunch. Nothing's open, right?
no, I can't see
Can
you.
we have a picnic in the park or anything?
I can't see you.
All right, forget about that. Maybe I'll call you. Anyway, just to remind you, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews on our website, our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of our other 25 global networks that I mentioned earlier, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, all of those. All right, enough of that. Welcome to the show, Ashley. And I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to have this conversation with the both of you.
Wow, we are just as excited as you are, maybe even more so. Tell me again how you found us, because this was like two ships passing in the night, and we says, hey.
Yeah, it was really serendipitous. I, wrote my book.
Serendipitous.
There we go.
That's a big
We're
word.
starting off with the big words. Leave it to a writer. So, my book, I hadn't really been focusing on, getting the word out about it. And I thought, well, let me see, where caregivers are, because I think those are the people that will benefit most from, my story and the book that I have out in the world. And I just was like, where are the caregiver podcasts? And yours just popped right up. And I did some research into you and said, I would love to be on this show and have a conversation with you. So yeah, here we are.
Perfect.
We had no idea that how many people listen, and we still kind of don't know because they're like everywhere, and a lot of places don't share that information with you because they don't know. But we must be doing something right if we're number 6 and number 10 and number whatever. We've been doing it for 7. I've been doing it for 7 or 8 years. Adrienne's been around for maybe 5. I don't know, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows. So, yeah, we're out there and we have a presence. So thank God for that. So,
Yeah, well, it's needed.
tell us about your mom. Now, what do you know about young people like that coming down with Alzheimer's? That's pretty scary. I know a guy in my church who's just been diagnosed with early onset dementia, and I think he might be in his early 50s or late 40s. He looks very young. So sad. He went driving to work, and he didn't know where he was, and he couldn't get back home, and that's a scary thought, isn't it?
It is. I've done some research into the statistics around this, and the most recent study found that 200,000 Americans have early onset Alzheimer's, so that would be before the age of 65. But I almost feel like the number would be higher if it was properly diagnosed, because I don't think physicians expect someone in their 40s to have Alzheimer's. So, personally with my mother, when she first started to develop the signs of it, it was the same exact situation. She was driving my younger sister to school, a school that she had been driving to for years, and one day just couldn't figure out how to get back home. And, when we took her to the doctors, they kept saying, maybe it's stress, maybe it's depression. No one floated the idea of Alzheimer's or dementia or some type of, brain illness. So it took us a long time before she even got diagnosed. But yeah, that's kind of how it began, just the confusion and misdiagnoses. And one day my sister and I just thought, it's Alzheimer's, but it just seems so irrational and such a crazy thought, because our mom was only 48 years old when this began. But turns out years later she finally was diagnosed.
You were in your 20s?
I was, yeah, early 20s. So it was a pretty shocking thing.
How did that affect your life? Go ahead, Adrian.
Go ahead. You and your sister are the ones who diagnosed her.
We did. It was
Doctors hate to diagnose that. I had a mother and a mother-in-law. They were both in their 80s, and they were in their 90s. I'm sorry. And man, it was like pulling teeth getting them to admit, because they're afraid of lawsuits or they don't know if we're the kind of caregivers or children that will just make up stories to steal their estate and everything. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah, there was actually a research study a few years ago that found that only about 50% of patients who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's are actually told by physicians. So there's been a huge movement to try to reverse that, because people aren't getting the care or the treatment or the resources that they need, especially in the beginning. So it is heartbreaking.
So my question was, how did it affect your life exactly? A 20-year-old is pretty active, dating probably, maybe college, just going here and there. Home is the last place you probably want to be. So tell me what went on and how you're still paying the price and so on.
Yeah, it is not. It's not the role you expect to fill. Yeah, I know. Where do I begin? It's not the role that you expect to fill when you're in your early 20s. And just a little backstory on me: I was already kind of in a really different phase of my life, because my backstory is I was a survivor of domestic and sexual violence. I was a college dropout. I was homeless. And so I was really rebuilding my life. I was back in school. I was working. I had all these goals I was working towards. And then this happened. And part of me at the time felt, I've been through all of this trauma, all of these difficult things. I know how to handle difficult moments. So I had a self-reliance that, like anything else, one day at a time I would figure it out. But nothing could have prepared me for what the next 8 years was going to look like. I turned to the Alzheimer's Association's website. I read the stages. It has nothing to do with the day-to-day activity of a caregiver. And yes, I was in school. I had this goal. I wanted to graduate top of my class. I still had to pay my bills. I was living on my own in the neighboring city, and every moment of my life was spoken for. If I wasn't in school, I was visiting my mom. When I wasn't working, I was seeing her on lunch breaks. I was taking breaks from classes and calling up home nurse associations and calling up our housekeeper and seeing. I mean, it was just constant. I couldn't not think about my mother for 1 second for almost 8 years.
Wow.
And it does
And
put a strain on relationships as well. I had moments where I just felt old, boring, like doing all of these, caregiving responsibilities, but I'm supposed to be young and youthful and out and having fun. And you kind of wonder, like, how is this my life right now? So, yeah. And, I'm the oldest of three. So I was taking care of my sisters. I was kind of co-parenting with my dad. It was a lot. It affects every aspect of your life.
Mm.
and how are you still paying the price now that she's gone? I mean, do you feel like there's 8 years of your life that you got cheated out on, or you're trying to catch up? You can be honest here with us, because we have Burnout caregivers listening, and you're talking to them.
Yeah, I will say that I didn't get to establish the relationships in my life that I needed. Close friends, just a close network of people that I can turn to, because I was always the provider. I was always the go-to for everybody else, that I never allowed myself to do that. And the older you get, and now in the time of COVID, it's harder to meet people and make new friends.
Yeah.
So I think socially, I lost that opportunity to really cultivate my network. However, I'm an alpha female, and so somehow I still accomplished things during that time. Somehow I graduated as valedictorian of my class and did all this community work, and I
What was
was
your
really
major?
involved. So I still get everything done, but there's parts of me that never got to be a normal 22-year-old.
Sure.
There's parts of me that never got to be a normal adolescent because of my experiences, but I try to find faith in the fact that they have shaped me into who I am, and there's lessons in everything. And I just trust in the story, as sad as it can be at times.
Now, I don't know too much about your sexual abuse childhood, but do you somehow blame your mother for not watching out over you or doing things that maybe she should have done or could have done?
Ooh, that is a tough question. I think my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she was great at being a stay-at-home mom. She was great at keeping our house, being there for our dance recitals. Mm-hmm. But my mom also, I don't think that she was the most assertive person. She kind of played the back seat in, her marriage, and I don't think she mirrored to me what a strong woman with a voice looked like. And we certainly never had conversations about dating or relationships. So I don't think I had the role modeling that I needed as a teenager to avoid some of those situations. Yeah.
Wow. That's how does this involve your sister? I mean, who was the primary caregiver? You say you were the person. Did she have any responsibility at all, and did that cause friction between you two? Like, well, you're not pulling your share, or I'm doing all the work. Where are you? And I'm here, and you're out dating, or whatever. I mean, what kind of interactions did you have about this? Because it's usually not pretty.
Family dynamics are so tough, and it's the thing that you don't expect to ever happen. Differing opinions, judgment. This one thinks you're not doing enough. This one's questioning why you're doing that. It's constant. But I think because we were all so young, it created a very different scenario, because I was in my early to late 20s during this whole span, whereas so I have two younger sisters. My middle sister was away at college, and so was my younger sister at a certain point. So I kind of was the only person that was around. Yeah. There were times where I knew, maybe my middle sister could have come around more, or she always had excuses. And I had to fight that, resentment that I would feel. Yeah. Because I'm thinking, I don't want to spend my Saturday night here, but I'm here, every weekend. I'd like a night off. And you feel very alone. It's like, where is everybody else? Why is it just me? And I know one thing I experienced was you'd have family members saying, oh, Ashley, if I can ever do anything, if you need anything, let me know. It's like, yeah, show up, give me a night off, and you want to just shake everybody and think, well, what does that mean? What do your words mean? So importance of stating your needs. So I need you to help me.
Yes, you need to make that clear when somebody says, what can I do? Is there anything I can do? I'm here for you. Be ready with what you need.
Make that list, because a lot of time you can't think of it at the time they ask it.
Right.
You gotta pull out that, well, I'm glad you asked. Can you do this? No. Can you do this? How about that, or that? Here, take a look. You got to do
Yes.
something on that list. I mean, you got to be assertive, and it's almost embarrassing. And sometimes you just embarrass yourself trying to ask for help. But you know what? This is
Mhm.
survival. It's either you or them.
Mhm.
Why don't we take a short little break, and we'll be right back, so don't go away. Dave Nassani, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his 6th book entitled It's My Life Too, Thrive to Stay Alive as a Caregiver. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through, because he is one. He now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his amazing caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first, before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too, Thrive and Stay Alive as a Caregiver will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today or buy one for your special caregiver. On sale everywhere and at caregiverdave.com. And we're back on the Caregiver Dave Show with my co-host and guest, there we go, Ashley Bendiksen and Adrian Gruberg. And we're talking to Ashley today. She is an author and a caregiver and a former caregiver, right? You're not caring for anyone right now?
No, thank goodness. I'll take a short break.
Time to care for yourself.
Adrian has a group called After Caregiving, I think she does, that
Nice.
that really helps because, it's almost like you need therapy now to get over all that stuff and to speak with other people who are in your position now. And some people just hope for the day that they become an after carer. So you have
And
a lot
carry
of
the
things to be
guilt
thankful
and
for.
carry guilt around. They carry
Yeah.
the guilt around that they wish it was over.
Yeah. And they have no right to feel guilty about that
Right.
because they're doing a lot better than most people would. A lot of people just say, sayonara, goodbye,
Right.
throw mom into a nursing home, which, 9 out of 10 of them I wouldn't put my cat in. Or from that movie, throw mama from the train, just throw her under the bus. And especially with your past. So you might have been able to justify it in your mind, well, what's she ever done for me, and a lot of people are like that.
My father did a lot, but my dad is very much a workaholic. His business is
Lucky
his,
him, huh?
He didn't know how to take time off until the last few years. So, most of it was us just juggling back and forth, me picking up the slack when he was at work. Sometimes I called out of work so my dad could go to work, and, that felt backwards. But, so we both kind of co-shared that responsibility.
When you're in your early 20s, that's got to be really, really rough on you. What are you doing with your life today?
Life is good. I'm
have a job?
self-employed. Yeah,
Oh, you're
I'm
an
self-employed.
entrepreneur.
Yes, yeah. I'm actually a full-time speaker on the subjects of domestic and sexual violence prevention. So I go into high schools and colleges. I teach healthy
That's
relationships.
a good match.
Yeah. It's there's ways that we can bring our stories full circle, and we can repurpose our stories to help others. Hence why I speak now, and hence why I wrote this book. Is I just felt, it's a story that needed to be told, and hopefully it serves other people's lives. It's a book I wish I would have found when I was going through my journey as a caregiver.
Yeah. Now, are you the author of one book or two books?
It is my first book.
Congratulations. When did it come out?
Earlier this year, actually. It was in the works to come out, but once the shutdown happened and I couldn't travel and speak in schools, it just became a perfect window of opportunity to finally publish this book. And it's funny, people will say, oh, how long did it take you to write it? I'm like, I don't know, 12 years, because I started journaling. So one of the things I did as a caregiver, and I've always done this for self-care, is I journal. I've been doing this since I was a teenager. So I was journaling, the day-to-day with my mom, the progression of her disease, also venting. And I ended up just taking a lot of these journal entries and, conversations I taped with her and turning it into this book. So it's really been a labor of love. I wrote the book, I think, more for me at first than anything else. I just had to get this story out. And now that it's out there, the response has been amazing of just, fellow other caregivers saying that they could relate, or certain things that felt unique to them, or they felt really isolated in what they were going through. It was validating to hear somebody else has gone through that too, which I'm sure you hear this all the time in your conversations. And and I think my biggest goal really with the book was cherish the time that you have with the people in your life, because you never know. You could wake up one day at 22 and know that your mom's got a terminal disease, and there's no change in that.
Yeah. Did she have moments of clarity? Were you able to share things with her from time to time?
They were pretty brief. My mom's cognitive decline seemed to happen pretty quickly, and even when we had, conversations, they were very surface level, and I couldn't really have, deep moments with her, which is also unfortunate because, as a young woman, that's the time you want to develop a bond with your mother. And,
sure.
I never got to go to a bar with my mom and have a glass of wine. I never got to have an adult conversation with her, and I wish I had. There's things I wanted to tell her about my childhood that she never knew about. And so it's really unfortunate. But I always say, so it was a true reversal of roles. I mean, I was doing my mom's hair, bathing her, dressing her, and I feel like it was a gift. I would not have changed it for the least, because I think I developed a bond with my mother that I might never have developed. The dependency we had, just this deeply primal connection that even when her words didn't make sense, I understood her. I was there for her. She could recognize my face and calm down in moments of, fits. So I think it's a really beautiful, journey that we shared despite, all that was missing from it.
Did she know who you were? Or you were just a familiar face? Or
I was one of the only people that she still could recognize up
so
until her final months. Yeah, and I think that's a product of, I was there almost every day. She could utter my name and she could utter my dad's name from time to time, but other people she struggled with. I think it was just a few months before she had passed, I remember she said my name again, and it was like a miracle. She hadn't spoken a word for months. And so that right there to me is beautiful, right? That she still could recognize me even in those final months.
How long ago did she pass? I just wanted to...
6 years ago, August 2014.
You're still feeling the effects of it.
Mm.
How did your sister react when she couldn't remember her, but she could remember you? Was there kind of some jealousy going on there? Everyone reacts differently.
I don't think she realized the disparity. I think she saw my mom less and saw how bad things were getting. I don't think she saw the moments that I got to share with our mother, and that's just because I was around. Yeah.
Yeah. People say that you're either a good caregiver or you're not. Caregivers are born. They need to have empathy and compassion and sympathy and just a million other qualities. And usually those are the ones that get drafted into it because the loved one knows who they want to care for them. And if there's many siblings, lucky you're the one because she knows you'll get the best care from. So
the cream rises to the top.
Yes.
So were you all those things? I mean, where did you struggle with? Where did you come to the point sometime to say, I can't do this, I can't take another day of this, I'm burning out, I need a vacation, I need help? Were you almost at that breaking point of burnout?
I did. I lost some light. It's East Coast, so it's getting dark at 4:30, unfortunately. Honestly, I felt burnout when my romantic relationship was not going well. One of the things I struggled with the most is I had no one to turn to, and that included the person that I should have been able to turn to. I was dating someone, it was a fairly long-term relationship, and you would think that's the shoulder you can lean on when you have those, moments where you're at your breaking point, and I didn't have that. And those were the days where I just felt so alone. I remembered having, my mom was in and out of nursing homes at times, and I remember just thinking, I don't want to spend another night at the nursing home. It's Saturday, I want to go out, I want to see my boyfriend. And they just weren't around, they weren't a good partner, and those are the moments that I just felt broke me, because I felt I am here for everyone who is here for me, and I just didn't have that support.
How did you make the connection by saying that, and then by saying, if I don't take care of me, nobody's going to? I assume you came to a point where you just decided to put self-care as a high priority, yes?
I did, because I had to. I was just... My mental health was starting to suffer. I was not I love the summer. We have beautiful summers here up in the Cape, and I wasn't enjoying it at all. I wasn't going anywhere, and I realized, I'm sitting here complaining. I have no one to go out with, and I'm a very independent person. I said, you know what? There was one summer, I said, I'm just going to take myself out. I'm going to take myself to that roof deck movie. I'm going to go to the Cape today alone. I'm going to, take a week off and go to Martha's Vineyard, and I forced myself to do this. Yeah, and you do feel guilty, though. My mom's going to be calling my name all day, and, I've got to leave my dad with that. But I'm like, no, I have to just do this. And you always come back feeling recharged, renewed, and more present, when you're back as a caregiver again. So, yeah, I had to be really intentional about doing that stuff for myself.
Did you ever get in conflicts with your dad that he's not doing enough and that, you need a vacation or a break and he needs to step up and maybe, not be such a workaholic? Do you ever have those kinds of conversations?
We definitely did. I think...
How'd it go?
I think I expected this of my dad, so it wasn't totally shocking, but there were some moments where I just said, I have bills to pay too. You're going to make me take the day off tomorrow? I have to wake up and be here at the hospital, and you're going to go to your office? And I think sometimes he would even expect me to be around even more than I was, and I'm like, I have two other siblings. Why is it all on me? And this is also the curse of being the firstborn, right? Typically, we are more nurturing, in control. There's higher expectations. So yeah, we butted heads a few times, but it was interesting because my dad changed eventually through this whole experience, and he works much less now, and in the last probably 2 years of us caregiving, we actually got extremely close. Also, I think, in a way, we probably wouldn't. And we were on the same page for a long time together, and he was appreciative, and, I'd never seen him be so appreciative towards me of anything, and I felt like that was a little gift out of all of this, too. Like, now I have a pretty all right relationship with my dad. So, yeah. No, I can't hear you.
I can't hear you either.
I had a cough and I muted myself and I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay.
Have to fix that. I was going to say your father's still alive.
He is. Yep.
And you have a good relationship with him now?
I don't talk to him as often as we did, in the early aftermath, but
yeah,
he's doing well. He changed his health habits after all of this. He changed his diet. He started going to the gym. Like I said, he works less, and he's doing very well despite it all, which is nice. And he has a partner now, so he's got some companionship, which is also a relief, because one of my first fears after my mom passed was, now I have to look after Dad, right? Because he's all alone.
You may still have to one day. You worry about that?
I dread this. But I was glad I didn't have to transition right into it.
How old is he?
He is 70.
70, and so maybe his new partner will take on that responsibility. Is she in good health? Is she younger?
She is like 12 years younger, so yeah. So she could.
There you go.
Take that on.
Maybe you can encourage that relationship to blossom.
Yes. Stay with her, Dad.
So do you feel like the goals of your book has happened yet, or you're still hoping that other things would happen with the book? And what I know you mentioned your goals that you had for the book, but maybe you can go into that a little more deeply. What is your ideal expectation for the book and how it's affecting people?
You know, of course, right now, I would love it to reach more people. You know, obviously, you know, birthing a book in the time of COVID was not an ideal situation because I expected to do a book launch. My community had been following my blog for years. I used to actually chair our regional walk to end Alzheimer's, so I had a lot of people in my community that were rooting for this book. And, you know, I didn't get to launch. I'm not doing the book tour I hoped for. I'm, you know, basically selling it from my home office. So, you know, I really wanted to reach more people, and I'm working on that. That's a daily work in progress. But I think the response exceeded my expectations. You know, when I wrote this, I mean, obviously for a living, I talk about domestic and sexual violence, and it's deeply personal stories that I share, but I've always felt like telling those stories were serving a purpose. Like, I have to raise awareness, I have to fight for justice. And for some reason, when I wrote this book, I felt like it's just a big, like, vulnerable, like, explosion of stuff, like, that was from my diary, and I'm like, it just felt so scary to share, like, my daily struggles, like the nights I went home and just wanted to drink a bottle of wine, my relationship problems, like my mom, you know, the struggles with my mom. And I just thought, do I actually want anyone to read this? I'm like, I want to publish it, but no one buy it and no one read it, because it was terrifying. And I actually found a group of people to be part of my launch, and that just eased all of my nerves because there was such positive feedback. People that weren't caregivers, had no relation to Alzheimer's or anything, that said they cried, they laughed, like they thought it was one of the best memoirs they'd ever read. And I was like, that is amazing. And I mean, you've written books. It's crazy to think like someone is spending, you know, 3 hours poolside reading your story, and it's just it's nuts. But yeah, the response has been beautiful. And you know, I think one of the things that I really wanted to get across is cherishing the present moment and how we take for granted just the littlest things, like, you know, my mom making me a sandwich, right? Like eating a sandwich my mom made me, or just the little stuff that we go through our lives and we don't think twice about. And I wanted to capture those little moments, you know, in this book. And you know, I think people have taken that away and thought, you know, I'm going to call up, like I've had people say, I read your book and I thought I'm going to call up my mom today. Or, you know, I'm going to write letters for my daughters to read someday. And it's just been really cool. Like, just appreciate your family and cultivate deeper relationships, because someday they're gone. And whether you're 21 or 61, you're never ready. So it's like, you know, be aware of just how lucky we are to have these people.
Were you worried that the person or the people who had molested you would find out, read your book, understand you're telling the world, and now, you know, how did they react to it? Yeah,
so that's not in the book too much. I really brushed past that. But I do plan on writing a book on that, and they are, I'm sure they are all well aware that I am, you know, out there in the world speaking. Some of them I know that they're aware. They've approached me over the years, but, you know, I've been on, you know, the regional news. I've been in papers and publications, so it's not a surprise to any of them. But, you know, sadly, those individuals have just moved on, and they're just ruining someone else's life. So I'm old news to them at this point. It's sad, yeah. Wow. Sad stuff.
But you're coping extremely well, and being out there as an advocate is just the best.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, when I finally ended that whole cycle, I had this just intuitive moment where I realized, you know, if I continue to struggle, they continue to win, right? Or that story continues to drive my life, and I don't want that anymore. And it just drove me to want to be the opposite, to defy odds, to succeed. So that I heard this great quote. It was Sinatra, the greatest revenge is massive success. And that just spoke to how I was feeling in the moment. And I said, I'm going to turn my life around and not let that decide what my life's going to look like. And it's probably the same thing for, caregiving, for something devastating, for loss. It's, it's heartbreaking. It's okay. It's okay to feel negative emotions, but it's also, this doesn't have to determine the rest of my life. And what are the silver linings, and how can I make something beautiful out of such a, traumatic experience? And I think that's one of the healthiest ways you can cope. And for me, a recurring theme has been repurpose your story, use it as a tool to help others. And it's been really cool to see that in my profession, and now with this book and with this whole journey of Alzheimer's advocacy.
The lesson here, go ahead, Adrian.
I just wanted to know if you intended to be a writer. Was that part of your plan before your mother? I mean, just being a journalist or whatever.
You were journaling, so was that because you one day wanted to write a book, or you were just trying to survive?
I think I just love the act of writing. I've always loved just putting pen to paper, and I've been keeping journals since I was a kid. I have stacks of them, so I like writing. And then, once I was 20 and putting my life back together, I thought, this is a story I would maybe put into a book one day. So I've had ambitions of writing a book. Since I've, found my entrepreneurial spirit. I'm like, I'm going to write a book someday, and have a podcast, and, all these things, and speak on stages. So I've always wanted to. I didn't think that my first book was going to be completely unrelated to my business. But it's the book that needed to be written first. It's, like I said, it's a labor of love. It was cathartic writing it. I mean, I would get out of my house and just go to a bar and get a glass of wine. I'd be writing my book at the bar, and sometimes I would just start sobbing, or I'd be laughing. Like, what are you working on? Like a packed bar. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm writing a book.
Writing is so cathartic, and it's so important. I used to do something on the caregiver space about the page listens, and it's not just writing it down. You're getting it out, you're expressing it, and it's a relief as well.
It is,
We're going to take another break. Hold that thought, and we'll be right back. Don't go away.
One Arm, One Leg, 100 Words, Overcoming Unbelievable Hardships is about Charlene, a stroke survivor. Back in 1996, Charlene was a healthy, normal, very active 52-year-old woman whose amazing talents resemble that of both a Martha Stewart and a Wonder Woman. But all that changed when she suffered a massive stroke that left her severely speech impaired and paralyzed on the right side. Who am I? My name is David. I've had the privilege of being Charlene's husband since 1975. We had a wonderful fairy tale storybook-like courtship that culminated in our marriage a year later. Charlene had just come out of a marriage where after 10 years, she received 2 black eyes and a broken nose by her former husband when he came home high on speed. Charlene believed in no second chances of any kind for abuse, so she left. Finding herself all alone in the world with her 5 and 10-year-old daughters, Cynthia Lorraine and Deborah Lynn, she started raising them by herself for the next 2 years. Then fate brought us all together. After falling in love with Charlene, Cindy, and Debbie, our love then produced Rebecca Elizabeth. We had a wonderful, normal life for the next 20 years. But today, things are very different for everyone. How about the reaction of 9-time Grammy and Dove Award recipient, the godfather of contemporary gospel Christian music, Andre Crouch? Charlene just won't let the promises of God go, and she has not let her circumstances get in the way of her faith. She's not just a survivor, she's more than a conqueror, as the Bible states. You'll be encouraged by her testimony, regardless of what you're going through. Available everywhere.
And we're back. The Caregiver Dave Show with my guests Ashley Bendiksen and Adrian Gruberg. And that was the book that I had to write because it was a memoir of what I've been through. If we don't get it out, I think it will turn to cancer. You got to just blush and get all those feelings and emotions out.
Yeah. Toxic.
Yeah. So I'm concerned about you. You gave up a boyfriend. Well, you know what? It's better that happened than you found out after 10 years of marriage that that he doesn't hang around when there's trouble. Have you found someone new?
I have a few over the years. Single again, lo and behold. But it's fine. That's the price of being who I am.
All right, everybody, all you
And,
eligible men out there, she is on the meat market.
that's right. Hit me up. Yeah, no, I've
You're a great
established
catch
some
for
really
anybody.
good relationships since.
Yeah, that's good.
I have a question about the way you were able to communicate with your mother. There are some people who don't you remember, don't you remember, don't you remember, and they don't quite get that you really have to change your way of communicating. How did you find that?
Yeah, so my personal opinion, and this is what I chose to do with my mom, was to always try to normalize a situation. So if she wasn't making sense, I would just try to pivot. I'd make light of something she'd said. I'd say, "Oh, you silly goose, it's not, it's not cold outside, it's summer." And, I think some people are like, "No, Mom, it's not cold. We're in summer. Why don't you remember this?" And I don't think that's helpful,
No.
but that's just, maybe I'm wrong. So I always try to
that's why
normalize
you're a natural.
situations. Yeah,
No, you're right. That's
Usually
That's
someone has to read a book to find that out.
Yep.
But you intuitively knew it.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed obvious. Like, you don't want to make them feel dumb or attacked. It's not their fault. It's a brain disease. So yeah, I would crack jokes. I would make light of conversations. And I think the longer you're a caregiver for someone, you start to understand their jumbled language. My mom would latch on to certain words, and I would know exactly what she was talking about. Like, she would call everything a candle, and she'd say, "Oh, we got to go get the candles," and I'd say, "Oh yeah, I know. We got to take the Christmas decorations down," and she'd be like, "Yep, yep." It's like you start to know what they mean. So I'd picture my mom on the phone with me. What's up?
I know what that's like.
Yeah,
My wife,
yeah. And
is speech impaired. She speaks her own language.
It is the language of Alzheimer's, I know. And you have to put yourself in someone's head. So, how do I know my mom's talking about the Christmas lights? Well, she's sitting on the rocking chair in the living room saying, "Oh, we got to get rid of the candles," and it's 4 weeks after Christmas. She's probably looking at the Christmas tree right next to her. I say, "Oh yeah, the Christmas ornaments, they got to take the tree down?" Yep. So you have to put yourself in their mind and just try to figure it out. And I think a lot of Alzheimer's is understanding them and also just finding creative solutions around these things to just normalize it as best as possible and not create unnecessary frustration or resentment in the process.
Now you have other books in you, don't you? What do you think your next one will be?
I have a vision for a few more, of course. I would like to write a memoir about my experience from, age 14 to 20, and it's quite a story. Just like I said, I dropped out of college, I was homeless, and then turned my life around, so I'd like to talk about that process and how people can redirect their lives. And I'd really love to write some type of a eventual, personal development book for women. I'm really big into intuition and spiritual development, and it really drives my life and has opened up a lot of opportunities, and I think a lot of people aren't in touch with that. So and potentially a book for teenage girls. I would love to write something for students that's really about building confidence and leadership, because I think that's sadly lacking, and even more so now with technology. I mean, I hear this stuff on a regular basis when I go into schools and I meet students, and they just lack so many skills that they need, from boundaries to self-esteem and healthy relationships, and you name it.
How do you set up speaking engagements in schools? Curious.
Yeah, it's all a sales game. I call up schools all day, every day. I pitch myself. I send my information. I ask if they hire speakers, if they host assemblies, and that's probably the best way to do it. I also have a lot of referrals now because I've actually been speaking in the youth market for 13 years.
That's something. Wow.
Yeah, but full-time for the past few years when I left my state job to pursue this full-time. And now I'm actually represented by Top Youth Speakers. It's like the leading youth speaking agency in the U.S. So
Wow.
they funnel some leads to me, which is nice.
That's
So
great.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love doing it.
How much of it do you do for free? At least in the beginning, I would assume.
I spoke for free for years. I had no idea that any speaker charged money to speak. I mean, I used to think, like, how could anyone charge money? Like, I was doing this to be, like, virtuous and give back and just tell my story. But when you're traveling, when you're spending hours, preparing, and then when I went back to school, I got my degree in criminal justice, and I worked for years in victim services, so now I'm an expert on this stuff. So now it's like, yes, I should get paid, and this is my livelihood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I donate a few times a year, usually to domestic violence nonprofits that don't have budgets but have an audience that really needs the message. But yeah, most of it's paid. Yeah, I speak on leadership. I also speak on activism because one of the things I did in my healing journey was I just dove into volunteerism and policy work, and I joined boards of directors, and so I'm really big into that. And students right now love this stuff. They love the idea of protesting and rallying and driving social change. So I speak on that too, which is kind of cool.
What do you think of today's youth and how they're being educated and stuff like that? Just curious. Compared to like 20 years ago, or compared to when you were in school, what's changed?
Well, I think technology is probably the biggest factor. There's research that shows it changes how our brains work. We don't retain as much. Students today don't need to memorize anything, even just basic facts, because they can always Google it. And at least in my sphere, when I talk about dating, the role of technology has really just destroyed any sense of boundaries. Students don't know how to say no. You're dating someone that's blowing up your phone all night, and now you're not focusing on homework because someone's angry if you don't answer right away. Or the newest thing is when you're in a dating relationship, you can show trust by sharing your passwords or sharing your location. And I'm like, no. If you have trust, you don't need to do those things.
You don't need to, yeah.
And they don't get it. They're like, well, if you have nothing to hide, why wouldn't you share your location? So is that a healthy dynamic to have a relationship where someone knows where you are at all times? And as adults, is this going to become the norm? So yeah, I think students have, they're more innovative, they're more creative, they're more efficient, but I also think they lack just inherent leadership skills, boundaries, self-care, just because they're going, and they're on their screens, and yeah, it's just a digital world.
How much do you think that has to do with social media and how dependent they are on that for communicating with each other?
It's a huge factor, especially when it comes to self-esteem. You'll have a student that posts a picture of themselves, and if it only has 50 likes, 2 hours later, they take it down because it's embarrassing. Or if you're dating someone and you've
50
got some
is
trust
embarrassing.
issues,
50 is
right?
embarrassing?
Like, I'll take it. But yeah, and then they're insecure, so then they're dating someone and they're stalking what that person's liking and who's commenting on their stuff, and it's just it's so unhealthy for their mental health. So yeah, I see it all the time. I've been talking about healthy dating relationships, like I said, for 13 years or so. And just the technology piece is a whole conversation in and of itself now that didn't exist even 6 years ago.
So you speak on this to them, yes? All the stuff you just mentioned? Do they receive it? Do you see light bulbs going on in their heads?
Do they hear it? Yeah.
Or do they say they just tune you out?
For the ones who
She sounds like my mother.
Right? It helps that I'm younger. They do listen to me. For the ones that feel pressured and constantly overwhelmed by their friend or the person they're dating, always wanting access to them, when I say things like, if you don't want to answer your phone, you don't have to. You can take an hour and put your phone away. Or you don't have to share your location if you don't want to. And you'll see them like, you're right? But it's like no one's told them that. Their parents don't talk to them about this stuff.
Permission.
Right. It's like, it's okay. And it becomes so obvious once you say it out loud. But, like most students, I mean, most teenagers, your parents don't talk to you about dating. They don't, most don't have these conversations. Most don't know this stuff is going on. And kids hide it really well. And so, yeah, I think they appreciate that I talk openly about this stuff.
I mean, as a caregiver, my husband needed to know where I was at all times. My cell phone was a leash. I really don't know what he would have done a few years before when I wasn't carrying a cell phone around with me constantly. It really changed the dynamic, but he felt secure because he knew where I was all the time. It wasn't a matter of jealousy. So that aspect of knowing where you are all the time, I didn't like it, but if it made him feel better,
right.
We were married, so it was okay.
Well, that's what's so interesting, too. It's like, if I get a call from my dad and I'm in the middle of something, I feel obligated to go answer it right away. And then the question is, well, why didn't you answer? You always have your phone in your pocket, so there's more pressure. It's like on-demand access at all times.
Yeah.
Oh, and God forbid you forget your phone.
Right.
And leave it someplace,
Some
Conveniently
people
forget
get really
it.
upset at that, They take it so personal.
Mm-hmm.
So many people are offended so easily.
Yes, you're hiding something from them.
So let's say, look at your whole life, and you can do it all over again. What would you change? And I used to say I wouldn't change anything because everything made me who I am, and the pain helps and this and that. But is that really true for someone like you? Because I know I would change a couple of things. How about you?
I don't think I would change anything up until my mom's diagnosis. I grew through it. I believe that she left me lessons from it. I would have maybe hoped it would have happened a little bit later in life, or that she would have lived a little bit longer. She had 8 years, and I'd always do anything to have a few more years with her. But other than that, like my childhood trauma, I wouldn't change it. It's shown me my mission and my purpose in life. But yeah, I do wish I wish I would have had more of a chance to just be a kid, or to just be a young adult, and not to have to grow up so fast. But there's blessings in that as well. So I wouldn't change much.
Well, in the last couple of minutes of the show, I wanted to ask you. Oh gosh, I forgot the question I was going to ask you. It was a good one too. I hate when that happens. I thought of it when you were saying what you were saying. Help me, Adrian.
I'll help you.
See, when you get to be my age, if you don't write things down, they'll go in.
Tell me about
I do it too. I do it too.
I'm a compulsive list maker. I like making lists. It gets me through the day. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Is there something you would like to share that we did not go over yet? And maybe while you're talking, I might remember what I was trying to get you to say.
I think this is kind of a concept I teach a lot, but a lot of times when you're exhausted and feeling like you're doing all the work, we want to say, like, why do I have to be here? Why do I have to be doing all this? And I'm really big into like reframing things, and I think if we can stop ourselves in those moments and say, I get to be here, I get to be doing this, that's how you can see that this is actually a gift, right? Caregiving is challenging, but it's also a gift. It's a beautiful thing to share. Someday you're going to look back and have fond memories and wish you could just be, giving mom a bath again, because you won't get to anymore. So it's it's not, why do I have to be there? It's, I get to be here doing this right now. And finding gratitude even in the most difficult moments.
I remember my question.
You
Praise
did.
God. Yes.
Yes.
Before it leaves again, I better spit it out of my mouth. is what were the last moments of her life like? I mean, I know what it was like for my mother in that last hour, and sometimes those are very special moments, and sometimes, can you repeat them? Can you relive that briefly?
Yes. My mom spent her last week in hospice in the hospital, and she was in a lot of pain. She, she was not responsive anymore. She was just being medicated and being kept comfortable. And I spent every single night there with her. I did not leave other than just to take a few, car drives every day for a little fresh air, because I knew I wanted to be there for it. And I knew that if anyone was going to be there, it probably would be me. And that's how it turned out. My mom eerily passed away the morning of my grandmother's birthday, which is my dad's mother. And I the whole week I said, it's going to be August 13th. It's too much of a coincidence. Of course it's going to be that day. My dad's mother also had Alzheimer's, and my mom and her were very close. And so I knew it was going to happen. And she had her eyes shut for days. I looked up, and I saw that her eyes were open. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, Mom, your eyes are open. I ran over, and she was looking out the window, and I went right into caregiver mode, right? I said, oh, it's so good to see you. And her eyes started to water, and I reached for the tissue, and I was doing all the things that I normally did, not even thinking that this was like the moment that she was about to pass. And so she was looking out the window. I'm blotting her eye. I'm like, oh, there you go. You're all set. And then she just kind of glazed over me and looked up at the ceiling, and my heart just stopped when I realized it. And she just took her last breath. And I was right there with her, and it felt like an eternity, even though it was just a second. But, I was so glad I was there for that moment. I was the last person she saw, heard. I took a moment to allow myself to have the room with her. I then started sobbing, of course, uncontrollably. I spoke for a few minutes. I remember thinking, just in case the Alzheimer's has ceased, right? And she has clarity right now for the next few minutes. I'm going to say all I need to say. I promised her everything I would do in life, I would do to make her proud. And then I closed her eyes and I got the nurse, and that was her final moment. So it was quiet, peaceful, hopefully not painful, and I'm so grateful that I was there for that.
You took advantage of that. You did a lot of closure, which is very, very important. So many people, regret the things that weren't said, whether she understands or not. There are people in comas that we understand that they can hear. Gosh,
Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful, wonderful interview. It was great. You're a great speaker, and if you need anything,
you are.
let us know. And we're so happy for your life. We're happy how you've turned your lemons into lemonade. And you're young, you're beautiful, you've got the world by the tail, and Prince Charming is out there, and you're going to know it when you see him.
I believe
he's going to be a lucky, lucky dog.
Lucky guy. So how do we get in touch with you if we want you to speak or?
Sure. I'm on all the social medias at Ashley Bendiksen, and my website is ashleybendiksen.com, and I have my youth speaking programs on there, so you can see what I offer students, and I do parent workshops and teacher trainings, and of course I'm always available to talk about this subject or do a virtual reading, or you can find my book on Amazon, The Language of Time.
What's the title of your book?
Yeah, it's The Language of Time. Still so crazy.
Very
you published your
nice.
first book. Like, I wrote
Great
this.
cover.
This is nuts. Yeah,
Who
thank
designed
you.
the cover?
I designed it. Thank you.
Good for you.
So that's on Amazon if anybody wants to find it, or thelanguageoftime.com.
Well, thank you. And Adrian is at
Thank you.
thecaregiverspace.org. Facebook, same name. And I'm at caregiverdave.com. Facebook, same thing. So thank you for coming along and being on the show and being a joy to our guests. You did a great job. Until next time, bye-bye.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.